I'm going to be presenting today on how to present grand rounds. So I thought, why not start things off? Over the last years, you guys give great grand rounds, but I think we can always tweak things and make things a little bit better. We've, or at least I've watched a lot of, let's stop this. At least my son watches a lot of TEDx videos, and TEDx does things great. I watch a lot of other little med-ed snaps, and we can do things in a shorter time frame and do it well. So let's talk about how we can make our own grand rounds great again. So as always, unfortunately, we do have to disclose any kind of commercial support. So commercial support, well, we're our own support. So the Division of Emergency Medicine, which means our academic tithe, is supporting academic rounds. So that's what's going to pay for our food. It's what's going to pay for our hardware. Gori and I do receive a small academic stipend for the year. I'm not sure that's really a potential for conflict of interest, but I thought I would put it in there. I didn't get extra funding for preparing today's rounds. I wish I did. That would be lovely, but maybe $100, which would work out to maybe half of minimum wage per hour for the time that I put into preparing. You guys know it takes at least 20 plus hours to prepare for an hour of grand rounds. So here's my bias. I want all of you to be able to present some kick-ass rounds this year. And I think you guys all have it in you. Elementary school, science fairs. First time, though, I had to get up in front of the class and give a prepared presentation. Well, this was public speaking contest, and I'm pretty sure it was somewhere around grade 5. I decided to talk about superstitions, black cats, walking under ladders, all that sort of fun stuff. Well, I had to go to the library. I had to find books because, back in the dark old ages when I was in grade 5, unlike you guys, we didn't have the internet. Probably not even computers. Actually, we had, no computers. That didn't start till high school for me. So I wrote my notes out on cue cards and I practiced on my parents until I could absolutely nail it. And then I had to talk in front of 30 of my classmates. And well, wasn't quite so easy talking in front of 30 of my classmates, but I managed to get through it. And I still remember the feedback that I got. I talked too fast. So since then, I've given my fair share of presentations. I've given grand rounds, I've given other talks, variety of topics, and I've attended a lot of presentations. Some presentations are absolutely fantastic. Some are good. Some, not so great. So the question is, why is it some people can deliver a really memorable message and others fall short? What is the secret to giving a great presentation? Well, here's the secret. It's not a secret. So there's actually a lot of research and a lot of evidence behind giving great presentations. And what I'm going to talk about today, really barely the tip of the iceberg. I started researching in preparation for doing rounds today, and the more I started to go down different rabbit holes, the further I kept going, and I'm like, okay, I've got to back off from that, because I could read about this one for days, and then I'd come back and I'd start going down another tangent. So lots and lots of information out there. My goal today, really, it's not to help you guys find your topic, but I'm going to help you learn how to present it in a way that's going to be engaging to your audience and to help your audience learn the key concepts in a way that's going to be meaningful to them. So here's your objectives up here. I'm not going to read through them. That's not the point of having slides. But this is what I want you guys to take away today. So your grand rounds, well, residents, you all have a faculty mentor. Please use them, work with them. Talk to them early on, work with finding a topic. So maybe you've had an interesting case, fantastic. Use that case, build on it. Maybe you haven't had a case that you really want to work on, but you've got a topic in mind. Honestly, I don't care if you make up a case based on that topic. Nobody's going to know. You all have access to the Grand Round spreadsheet. Pick your topic early. Put it on the spreadsheet so nobody else can take your topic, because it's first come, first serve. Ideally, from a housekeeping standpoint, please send your rounds or put your rounds up at least a month in advance, because we're trying to get our posters out early enough, so at least a month's worth of posters. You'll notice that September's went out kind of mid-August, so that people know in advance what the rounds are going to be, and then I'll be sending out rounds posters about a week or so ahead of time. So feel free as well to use our committee to help you hone your presentation. Ken Milne is actually helping people hone their presentations at the Feminem conference in New York in October. So he's actually pretty high level at presentations. So use him. He's available. He's offered his help. The key with giving a good presentation is to really practice doing it. I would love to have my rounds today far more polished than it is, but I decided to take my son to Chicago last week instead. That was a little more important in my time frame. He started high school this week. What was more important? Pricing grand rounds for you guys? Yeah, it's definitely up there. Taking my son for an awesome 4-day trip to Chicago? That's up there. All right, so let's talk about the meat of today's topic. What I'd like to cover is something called P-cubed presentations. So P-cubed is a concept that was talked about by a gentleman by the name of Ross Fisher, where the idea of the presentation, so it's called P-cubed because it's a sum of 3 parts. P1, the story, P2, which is going to be your supportive media, and P3, the delivery. So there's lots of evidence-based methodology to giving a presentation that's going to be effective. So TEDx uses them, Smack Talk uses them, lots and lots of good examples. Generally, I think we have 3 types of presenters. We've got our P2 presenters. So I think a lot of people have been P2 presenters. That means people who are media heavy. They're the people who use PowerPoint, they use great graphics, they use the animation, they bring the lists in one by one, they do the slow reveal. Honestly, those slides can be done on their own. You don't even need a presenter. And it actually takes away from the presentation. People learn less, or at least equally, with a P2 presenter. A P1 presenter is somebody who, frankly, doesn't even need slides. They could just give the talk, no slides at all, and be able to give their message. So a nice example of that, something like MRAP. You're listening to your podcast when you're driving in your car or going for a run. I do that. Problem with that, though, is that you're listening, but you don't necessarily retain as much information. I'll talk a little bit about the theory of that later, but I know that when I'm driving my car and I'm listening to MRAP, I probably retain maybe like 2% of what I'm actually listening to. If I listen to it again and again, I'm going to remember more. But if I just listen to it the first time round, I don't retain a whole lot. And it's actually related a little bit to our dual channel theory of memory. So we will talk about that a little bit. So let's start with the first part of things. So P1, the story. So first part is that when you guys are giving your grand rounds, for the most part, you're going to be actually giving a case-based presentation. So anybody recognize this woman? Yeah, from Harry Potter, yeah. So this is Professor Trelawney. So humanize the story. Don't break confidentiality. But let's describe this patient. Let's say this is Sybil. She's a 38-year-old divination professor from Western University presenting with visual and auditory hallucinations. We all know that she was kind of prophesizing the dog chasing Harry, right? So 38-year-old woman by the name of Sybil, professor with hallucinations. That is going to get people to have a little bit more emotion than saying 38-year-old woman presenting with visual and auditory hallucinations. That emotion actually makes you remember things better. So by giving your case presentation or your patient a name, a fake name, a little bit of a description about who they are and what they are, you're going to give your audience a little catch, a little memory catch. They'll remember the rest of the case better, and they'll remember the rest of the information better. So start off and even give it a little bit of a picture. Again, you can find something off the web. Maybe you're going to describe a student, well, give a generic picture of a student or a picture of a crowd with a student that stands out from it. Anything along those lines is going to give that little emotional catch. Your audience will remember things a little bit better. Second part, give your message early. So nice little sheepdog. You know, we have a couple of sheepdogs. Well, had a couple. One unfortunately died recently because she was old, Abby. But this is what sheepdogs do. They get the attention of the sheep early. But the reason we want you to get the message early is it actually has some value and relevance, right? So if the audience perceives value and relevance to what you are talking about, they're actually going to follow your presentation, right? So their thinking now is going to be related to the end goal. It's not going to be distracted. Because, again, I don't want to say, you know, when you're giving your case, give all the information away right away. Don't do that, because we still want to engage our audience. So, you know, you can give a little bit of a reveal, but you still want to give a lot of it early. So tease the audience a little bit, but if you leave them guessing for most of the presentation, what's going to happen is that their thinking ends up being split a little bit between listening to what you're saying, looking at the slides, and trying to figure out where the heck does all of this fit together. And then they're not going to be connecting things in their memory. So our memory is connected to three things. So it's connected to, or our attention is connected to three things. So it's connected to memory, interest, and awareness. So as audience members, you guys use previous experiences to know where you're going to pay attention. So if you have interest in a subject, you're actually going to be more aware of it. And that's because our brain is actually continually scanning the horizon for things of interest. And if it's something that we're interested in, it will actually capture our attention. So good example, you know, I bought my cute little Z3 last summer. And all of a sudden, I was aware when I'm driving down the street, oh, hey, there's a Z3, hey. Whereas in the past, I probably wouldn't have been aware of other Z3 drivers out there. I would have just kind of driven past them in oblivion when I was in my RAV4. But by having one, I'm more aware of it. And then when I'm scanning the horizon for things of interest, because it's in my mind, I'm going to pick it up much more quickly. So the same thing when you're giving a presentation. If you tell people a little bit early what your message is, they're going to pick up the cues during your presentation of the interesting part, and they're going to be paying more attention to it. Next part, be succinct. Don't ramble like I've been doing. So a great presentation really has a single portable message. Let's face it, most of us can't remember more than 3 new items, and most of us aren't even actively trying. And I'm guilty of that. So really 3 is too many. So our role as a presenter is to make connections among the pieces of information. You can present a lot of pieces of information. You can list a lot of facts, but we're not going to remember them, right? Our goal is to help people make connections. Our goal is to make the what of data into the so what of information. So what does this mean to me? And by making the what into a so what, we will be able to commit that to our memory. So we're able to link things. So how are we going to do that? How do we get from the so what, you know, from the what to the so what? Well, I've got a little list of things that you can do. So first thing you do, once you've chosen your topic, consider your audience. So are they open to change? Well, I hope you guys are open to change, but you might also be established in your ways. You might say, you know, Christine, you're full of shit. I'm happy with the way I make my slides and give my presentations, and I'm not going to change. Or you might say, you know, Christine, you got some good ideas here. At the end of this, I'm actually going to incorporate some of the changes that you make. Great. Are they experienced clinicians or are they green learners? Well, I think, you know, for grand rounds, we actually have a good balance across the spectrum. We go anywhere from medical students to residents to experienced faculty. The other thing when I look at my audience is I say, what do they need to get out of my topic? So think about your objective. What is the objective of your topic, right? Write it down. Be specific. Think about where your audience is now in their learning or their understanding and where you want them to be when you finish your presentation. Even consider having a bit of an elevator pitch. So An elevator pitch means if I had somebody trapped in an elevator for 3 or 4 floors, 30 seconds, what can I tell them in that 30 seconds that is going to deliver the message? Once I know that that's my little elevator pitch, this is my message that I can deliver, then I'm going to be able to figure out how to tell the rest of my story. And then you're going to brainstorm your topic. And that means you're going to sit at your computer and the internet and you are going to research the shit out of it. Okay? And that's the part that takes time. You research, you take your notes. I still do everything on paper. I've got an iPad Pro and I can do the highlighter app, but I still find I learn better at pen to paper. That's me. Some people are better with a computer. Construct your storyline. All right, so I've got my storyline. I've got kind of 3 parts in here. You may want to add some mini stories that are going to need some resolution, add some sparks of interest, write it out, expand on everything that you want to say. I actually wrote out everything, and then I edited it. I trimmed it down. I practiced it. I trimmed it down some more. I edited it some more. At the end of things, you make sure you have a star moment, and we'll get to that right at the very end. So star moment is something to always remember. And this could always just be a little challenging statement, maybe an interaction. And once you have your story ready, once you've done your research, you've got your story written out, then you fire up your presentation software, whether it's Prezi or whether it's going to be PowerPoint, which is what I'm using. Then you fire up your presentation software and you get your pictures or your text or your graphs. All right? So we're at the end of, well, a little more than 10 minutes. So I usually try to put things into 10 to 15-minute bites, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I have a cute little 4.5-minute video clip. So if any of you are familiar with CBC's This Is That, there was a nice little parody of TED Talks on it. And I'm hoping I can play this well. There we go. This tells you all the things that you need to do.
I am a thought leader. You know that I'm a thought leader because I'm wearing a blazer, I have glasses, and I've just done this with my hands. I'll now walk over to my laptop. By doing so, I'm demonstrating to you that as a thought leader, I understand technology and that there will be slides. Because everybody knows that a presentation is more legitimate than it actually is if there are slides. I'm now going to come back to the center of the stage and give you some unremarkable context about how I became a thought leader. If it's okay with you, I'd like to pace while telling you this story. In 2009, I met a thought leader, and I asked him, how did you become a thought leader? And you know what he said? He said, I don't know. Now that doesn't sound important, and it's not. But if I repeat it 3 times, I'm making you believe that it is important. He said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Let's look at a picture of the planet for no reason. What happens if I put some words over it? How about numbers? What if I close the button? By doing this, I've now made you think that I know what I'm talking. Walking over here, I'm going to change the tone of my voice. And I'm going to tell you an unremarkable story that's seemingly unrelated. And it's funny. You'll know it's funny because I'm laughing. And you're laughing. And you'll ask yourself, what does this have to do with this talk? What is the point? Well, coming back to the center, slowing the speed, lowering the volume of your voice by looking at you directly, by making a list on your fingers. I made you believe Water. Bring this puppy home. Graph, 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 pie chart, statistic. How about we end with a question, a very big question. What if everybody in this room decided to come together and agree with what I'm saying? Let's look at the planet again. That is the world I want to live in. Coming back to the center of the stage. Standing ovation. Humble head nod. Humble head nod. See someone I know. Humble head nod. Video fades to black while the applause continues for an unrealistic amount of time.
It covers everything, except substance. So what are your thoughts on this? Like, honestly, how did Pat Kelly do? Did he deliver a great presentation? Yes, he delivered. What did he deliver? Comedy, okay. I mean, there was no substance, right? There was no story to this. It was definitely fun. He had some great slides. They didn't actually support what he was talking about, but they were great slides. But he knows how to deliver, right? And honestly, this is what TED Talks is about. TED Talks, I read some stuff on how they actually prepare their presenters. They spend days and days honing their presenter skills, taking them so that they can just present their entire thing verbatim, walking across the stage. I would love to pace across the stage, but unfortunately this speaker doesn't move with me. And I don't necessarily know I can present my voice loud enough to do that. So I'm just going to stand here. I do have my presentation notes, thankfully. Thank you, Andrew, for telling me that I could do this on my iPhone. So I could walk around. But I took a little break at that 10-minute point, and I'll talk about that later, why I did that. We're going to move now on to our supportive media. So P2, supportive media, we have, list it on my fingers here, text, photos, graphics, and animation. Oh yeah, sorry, I actually just kind of read a list, didn't I? Sorry, wasn't supposed to do that. All right, so here's where we get into a little bit more of the meat of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about research, evidence. All right, so Richard Mayer, he's a professor from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and he actually describes 12 principles of multimedia learning, and don't worry, I will not cover all 12 because that would be really painful. However, I'm going to cover 6, so I'll go through 6 slides, which are relevant to your slide design. Do you guys remember back to when I talked about MRAP and how I can't remember what they said? So this actually comes from a lot of the multimedia principles. So this is this next slide. So the multimedia principle really talks about how we learn better when we're using more than one channel. So this is a little bit of a meteor slide. Meteor, not meteor. It's a little bit of a bigger model, but I'll break it down for you. On the left in the blue, we have 2 channels, words and pictures. So words can be heard and they can be read, right? And we have pictures. When we get either verbal or visualized words combined with pictures, and don't forget I said or. So hearing or reading combined with pictures, the brain actually integrates the 2. So we call that the dual channel theory. And when we integrate the 2, we're able to learn it better. Now the problem can come up though, when we actually, and this is where PowerPoint really can cause a lot of problem, we can overload the channels. So there's something called the cognitive load theory, which says that when we have written words and somebody narrating, so I would be up there and I'm going to read out exactly what's on the screen, that actually overloads your channel. And you actually learn less. And that's why we're going to talk a little bit as we go along here, why we don't want to have text on our screen. So we want to have media that supports what we're narrating, but the media really should be a picture, or a graph. We can use text sometimes, but we want to minimize the amount of text that's up there. And I think in the past, a lot of the presentations I've seen have tended to be text heavy, and we want to try and decrease that as much as we can. So cognitive linking is going to occur at the end when we're able to kind of take our prior knowledge, take these two pathways, integrate all of the information, and then eventually, hopefully, store it into our longer-term memory. So Mayer's coherence principle. This is number 2. So when we apply it to making our slides, this principle essentially tells us that interesting, yet irrelevant material is actually going to hurt our learning, right? So bottom line, exclude it. If it's irrelevant, cut it out. So less is more. This slide, pretty crappy, right? You got a picture here, you got sounds, you got words, you've got images, I've got text up there. I mean, I can read it out there. People learn better when extraneous words, pictures, and sounds are excluded rather than included. So I'm basically repeating exactly two ways. I'm overloading that channel. It's not good to do that. So just get rid of all of the extra shit. You don't need it. Next slide. So people learn more deeply when cues are added that highlight the critical aspects of the presented information. So this is a signaling principle. So let's go back to Sybil, our 38-year-old crystal meth addict. Oh, look at that, crystal meth. You guys do that really well. I've seen you do that. So when we're presenting cases, you'll often put up all the little tidbits of information, and then you either put a circle or a red arrow, so you highlight the important data. So this technique works well, generally. Works very well for new information or for people with low prior knowledge of the subject. But essentially, we want to signal the pertinent information, particularly with busier slides. So it might be a picture with a little bit of verbal text around it, and you just want to highlight one or two little points on it. So again, you can use arrows, you can use circles, you can use squares, doesn't matter, but something that's going to signal the important information. So next one is going to be the redundancy principle. So people learn here better from graphics and narration than from graphics, narration, and text. So again, this is the principle where less is more. Your audience is going to benefit from complementary text, but not identical text. So this is when we overwhelm our pathways, and we don't want to overwhelm our pathways. You can consider adding additional on-screen text to your narrative if there's no pictorial presentation. So I couldn't really think of a good pictorial presentation for redundancy principles. So I thought, well, I'm going to use text to highlight something. So this text actually has a purpose. Sorry, I was trying to add something semi-funny in there. My son thought it was funny. All right, next one, spatial contiguity. So you can see there, apple, cherries, peach, pear. Those are easy, right? What about the images on the left to the text way over on the right? They're a little bit harder to put together. So again, if you have an image on the screen and you have a little bit of a text describing it, put the text as close as you can to the image that it's describing, either with an arrow. I mean, you guys have seen pictures of brains up there with the little arrow and the brain part. It minimizes cognitive distraction. The people or your audience members are able to concentrate on your narration rather than they're on their eyes flicking back and forth on the text, trying to make the link on the screen. So it just makes things a little bit easier for your audience. And the last one that we're going to cover, so again, I didn't want to go into great detail. There's a lot more in-depth explanation of all of these principles, but I just wanted to cover things fairly lightly, is the temporal contiguity principle. And this really talks about the timing of presenting your information. So this just talks about when you're corresponding, or people learning better when corresponding animation or pictures is presented at the same time as your text. So this is allowing your information to be processed in your working memory all at the same time, rather than having to hold it in your working memory and then look at another slide and then try to process things. So you just want to keep things all in your working memory at the same time. So I'll give you a little bit of an example here. So I'll read this one out. So sleep duration and hours of screen use among adolescents in the Youth at Hordaland study. And there's my graph to describe what happens. So do you guys remember what the previous slide was, right? So you had to hold that verbal text in your working memory, right? So it was presented in the text in the first screen, presented the same kind of information or a little bit more of the graphic information in the second screen, but you had to hold the first screen into your working memory. Whereas if I just put them both together, so graph plus the little description at the bottom, you can keep both in your working memory at the same time. It's just going to improve your learning. So it's a small thing, but it does make a big difference. So you guys are probably wondering, why the heck is Christine putting up something about screen time and sleep? I have a teenage son. Need I say more? He and I argue all the time about the amount of time that he spends on his iPhone. So we now have an agreement that he hands it in to me at 9:30 at night and it gets plugged in downstairs. Took us a long time to get there, but at least now I know he's able to get some sleep at night without his iPhone in his room, because it's certainly a cognitive distraction. I had to do a lot of research on this, and I printed off a lot of papers and articles for him to read. He still doesn't fully believe me, because it's like, Mom, that doesn't apply to me. I'm not going to look up stuff on my phone at night. I'm like, bullshit. He's a teenage kid. I mean, I look at my screen at night. Like, he's not going to? So moving along, how are we going to tie some of this together? So I do have some, at the end of this, I'll give you a little bit of, in my references, a few little articles and a few reference websites that you guys can go to if you want to get more information. But I really like this one. This was based on engineering students, but they're smart, we're smart. I think we can work this together. But I liked what this group did. So this group said, let's take Mayer's principles and make our slides using Mayer's principles. PowerPoint, although PowerPoint is great, but it doesn't follow any of Mayer's principles, right? It has a title, great, and then it has bulleted lists, and then it has your sub-lists. So as soon as you start adding in sub-lists, those things are less important. People don't really pay as much attention to them. The lists really don't link information, right? So you're not getting you're not turning the what into a so what, unless you have a really good narrator who's able to give that information. So they said, well, let's make a change up. And when they did that change up, so they put a phrase or a sentence describing the overall concept at the beginning instead of just a little title and bullets, and then they put a picture. And what they found was that, well, a couple of things. So the cognitive load for their students, their perceived cognitive load, was a lot lower. And then when they did all the testing in terms of memory, what the kids learned from this went up. So testing scores went up, memory went up. So again, lots of evidence behind it. It does work. So let's give you a little example here. So, classic, Lyme disease, right? Rash, flat, red, bullseye appearance, transmitted by Borrelia burgdorferi. I love that word. Versus, so, you can look at that and say, okay, let's read out the list. But I'm not really making a good cognitive link here. Versus something like this. I would put this up. I wouldn't necessarily even read it out. But then you guys have your sentence there, you have your image, and then I might dive into my story or narrative about the rash, and I might start talking about other rash presentations. Because Lord knows, yeah, we've got our classic bullseye rash, but let's talk about our other rash presentations. And then I'm going to talk about the timing of the rash. And I'll talk a little bit more about the tick involved and when we need to worry about it. So you don't want to put all of your information on the slides. You don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. So the bottom line on slides, right? They need to support your narrative. but not be identical. Text is okay, but please, 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 please do not put too much text on your slides. Pictures are fantastic, but they need to be relevant. All right? Graphs, absolutely, again, if they support what you're talking about. So let's talk finally about the delivery. And we won't talk too much about this, but I bet you guys thought I would never get here. So a few pearls. TED Talks, they've got an 18-minute time limit. And they show they can cover complex, innovative ideas in 18 minutes. So why the hell a grand round 60 minutes? I mean, I know it's tradition, but 60 minutes, I certainly can't talk for 60 minutes on any one single topic. I mean, we get our CME credits, which is awesome, but they really don't need to be 60 minutes, and most people cannot keep sustained attention for more than 20 minutes. I'm one of them. I know I'm pretty guilty of sitting in the back and checking my emails and checking my texts. Okay, I'm bad, and I know some of you have been doing that. Aaron, Mike. 10 minutes later, at the end of P2, I tried to put in a little bit of a funnier anecdote about my son and screen time. All right? The reason you want to do this is you want to put in a little bit of an emotional charge to recapture your audience's attention. So that emotional charge, again, is going to get a little bit more attention, recharges them, and they're going to be able to pay more attention for the next 10-minute soundbite. I mean, give or take 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be exact, right? When you get back into that next 10-minute clip, again, you want to have a little bit of a story, so a little bit of a rise and a fall within that 10-minute story. Another idea, if you're giving grand rounds, consider like a little mini workshop, right? Talk for 15 minutes, throw in a little mini workshop or an exercise for 15 minutes in the middle, then summarize it, add a little bit more context, and then put some time in for some questions. So there's a few ways that you guys can present, right? You can do what I did, which is read off your phone, read off a teleprompter, not that we have those, read off some cue cards. You could just have a few little bulleted notes to read off. I mean, heck, you could memorize your entire presentation and just narrate it verbatim if you have time to memorize it. I know I don't. Your tone needs to be conversational. A little bit animated. Don't talk too fast like grade 5 Christine, okay? And practice it, all right? Keep eye contact, look at a few people in the audience. Try to not look back at your screen too often. But most of all, practice it. So I ran through mine a few times. Gory was a victim. My boyfriend was a victim. I practiced it just on my own a few times, just read it out loud, partly to get the timing, partly to make sure I was a little bit more comfortable. I added a whole lot more when I talked today, as I tend to do, but at least I had a little bit of my flow down. So practice, practice, practice. And I know that time is limited, especially for residents. Time's also limited for faculty. When I decided to add this in for grand rounds, it was only about 3 weeks ago. In that 3 weeks, I had a week's vacation. I had a whole lot of shifts, and I had 4 days away with my son. But I was still able to get this done. So it's hard, but I know that you guys can do this, okay? So finally, our star moment, the something to always remember. You guys are all capable of giving a great presentation, all of you. As audience members, we need to be mindful to pay attention, right? Don't check your emails and texts, or at least try not to. You got to remember, our residents and our faculty put a whole lot of time and effort into developing a grand rounds presentation, and they are worthy of your attention. So please come to grand rounds when you can. If you're not able to be here, but you're not working, please stream in. So we're working on WebEx. We're also going to be streaming things to YouTube live and then publishing them up to YouTube afterwards. So we're working on figuring out the best way to do this. I think ultimately we may just be doing it to YouTube. Hopefully that's going to be the best way to do it. And that's it for today. Here's my resources. I think a couple of good sites for you guys to go to would be the Mobile Presenter and Ross Fisher's site, which is ffolliott.com, if you want to get a little bit more information on how to give a good presentation. I did send out a PDF version of the slides, so it'll be on there. And now I will open the table to any questions if you guys have any. So walking to the middle, standing ovation, head nod, head nod. Okay.